Beneath the ruins of Mesopotamia, a secret lies buried, one that could rewrite human history. Clay tablets, etched in a lost language, tell a story modern academia dares not accept. These are not mere relics, but evidence of a forgotten chapter. Gods who descended from the heavens, the Anunnaki. The Sumerians recorded their arrival, technology, and impact on humanity, not as myth, but as history. Mainstream scholars dismiss these accounts as fantasy, but what of their eyewitness reports? The tablets claim these visitors created mankind, not out of kindness, but to serve as laborers. This narrative, locked away for millennia, challenges the comforting story of gradual human evolution. The Sumerian tablets force us to confront the possibility that our gods were advanced beings from another world. Why do these stories persist across countless cuneiform records? Because the truth is too disruptive to accept. The answers are etched in clay, waiting for those willing to listen. The Sumerians insisted the Anunnaki engineered our species. The Enuma Elish, when viewed through a technological lens, describes genetic modification, combining Anunnaki DNA with that of Earth's hominids. How could an ancient civilization conceive of such science? Their art depicts symbols eerily similar to DNA's double helix. They knew of distant planets, even a mysterious Nibiru, long before modern astronomy. Mainstream science scoffs, but cannot explain the Sumerians' knowledge. This is the forbidden narrative: humanity as the product of advanced intervention, not chance. The evidence is hidden in plain sight, ignored and ridiculed by those protecting the official story. The cover-up began the moment these tablets saw the light. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Sumerians claimed their knowledge was a gift from the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. Their society, laws, and kingship were said to be handed down by these sky beings. When archaeologists unearthed their tablets, they found stories of skyships, celestial battles, and gods walking among men. The Sumerians described the creation of humanity as a biogenetic project led by Enki and Enlil to produce a labor force. The first human, Adamu, was not a miracle, but a calculated creation. This account undermines both Darwinian evolution and religious creation stories. Officially, these are dismissed as myths, but the Sumerians were meticulous record keepers who distinguished history from legend. To them, the Anunnaki were real, and their story a suppressed history. Why hide it? Because it challenges everything we think we know about our origins. The Sumerians' chilling assertion humanity was designed for servitude. Their history has been systematically buried. Sumerian art and seals depict what looks like a double helix, DNA, thousands of years before its discovery. Figures wear what resemble astronaut suits and wrist devices, suggesting eyewitness testimony, not imagination. The Enuma Elish, often called myth, describes celestial events and the creation of the asteroid belt with uncanny accuracy. The Sumerians mapped the solar system, including a 12th planet, Nibiru, with a vast elliptical orbit. This Shar cycle explained the gods' arrivals and departures. Modern astronomers now search for a Planet 9, echoing Sumerian claims. The blueprints of the gods are resurfacing, challenging the boundaries between myth and science. Were the Sumerians documenting what they saw or inventing fantasy? Their records suggest the former. Why did the Anunnaki come to Earth? The Sumerian tablets say gold, not for wealth, but to save their homeworld, Nibiru, by repairing its atmosphere. Mining gold was dangerous, so they created humans as a labor force. The Atrahasis epic describes a labor revolt among the Anunnaki, leading to humanity's engineered birth. Our obsession with gold, echoed across civilizations, may be a programmed legacy. The Sumerian flood story isn't divine punishment, but a calculated act by Enlil to control humanity's numbers. Only Enki, the scientist, warned the human, Ziusudra, to survive the deluge. Humanity's survival was an act of rebellion, not divine mercy. The story of gold is the story of our origin and our purpose. The truth, it seems, is far stranger than myth. When the first wave of British and European archaeologists descended upon the sands of Mesopotamia in the 19th century, they expected to find relics that would validate the biblical narratives they held dear. They were searching for the Tower of Babel, the Garden of Eden, and proof of the Great Flood as told in Genesis. What they found instead was something far older, far more complex, and infinitely more threatening to their worldview. As they painstakingly translated the thousands of cuneiform tablets unearthed from cities like Nineveh and Ur, a disturbing picture began to emerge. These texts spoke of gods who were not singular and ethereal, but numerous physical beings who came from the sky, feuded among themselves, and directly intervened in human affairs, including our very creation. The academic and religious establishments of the era faced a monumental crisis. The Sumerian accounts predated the Bible by thousands of years, yet contained shockingly similar stories. A creation of man from clay, a great flood, and a savior who builds a boat. But the Sumerian versions were stripped of divine morality. They were pragmatic, technological, and often brutal accounts of extraterrestrial masters and their human workforce. To admit the truth of these translations would be to suggest that the Bible itself was a later, edited, and sanitized version of a much older and distinctly non-divine historical record. This was an unacceptable conclusion for the Victorian mindset, which was built upon the unshakable pillars of Christian supremacy and scientific rationalism. And so, the suppression began. It was not a grand cinematic conspiracy orchestrated from a single smoke-filled room, but a slow, insidious process of academic consensus building rooted in fear and prejudice. The word mythology became the primary weapon. By labeling the Anunnaki stories as mere folklore and religious allegory, scholars could safely contain their explosive implications. They were filed away not as history, but as the fanciful imaginings of a primitive people. Leaked internal memos and private letters from this period, however, reveal a darker truth. A now infamous alleged memo from the British Museum, dated 1897, supposedly instructed translators to actively censor or reinterpret any direct references to human creation by celestial beings, citing concerns of potential cultural contamination and social unrest. This act of intellectual quarantine was a deliberate choice. The translators and their patrons understood the power of these texts. They knew that if the public were to learn that the oldest civilization on Earth recorded a history of being genetically engineered by aliens to mine gold, it would shatter the very foundations of society. Religion would be threatened, the narrative of human exceptionalism would crumble, and the authority of the institutions that built their power on these stories would be questioned. Therefore, the Anunnaki were relegated to the footnotes of history, their story repackaged as a harmless myth. The conspiracy was not just to hide the tablets, but to mistranslate and misrepresent their contents for over a century. The suppression of the Anunnaki narrative was fueled by more than just a fear of contradicting the Bible. It was deeply entangled with the prevailing scientific and cultural dogma of the 19th and 20th centuries. The theory of Darwinian evolution, while revolutionary, had become its own form of rigid orthodoxy. It preached a slow, linear, and unbroken chain of development from simple organisms to complex ones. The Sumerian account, with its claims of sudden genetic intervention and the abrupt appearance of a highly advanced civilization, was a direct assault on this neat and tidy model. It introduced a variable that science was unwilling and unprepared to consider: extraterrestrial contact as a catalyst for human evolution. This scientific dogma was compounded by the pervasive racism of the era. Victorian and early 20th century academics were steeped in the belief of European superiority. They viewed ancient peoples, particularly those from the Middle East and Africa, as primitive and intellectually inferior. The idea that these ancient Sumerians could have possessed knowledge of genetics, astronomy, or advanced engineering was simply unthinkable to them. It was far easier and more comforting to their prejudiced worldview to assume that these stories were allegorical. They could not accept that a primitive culture could have accurately described concepts that their own advanced civilization was only just beginning to grasp. Therefore, any evidence that pointed to advanced ancient knowledge was systematically dismissed or explained away. When faced with depictions of beings in what looked like helmets and suits, they were called horned gods in ritual attire. When confronted with images resembling the DNA double helix, it was interpreted as a simple symbol of fertility. The detailed astronomical knowledge was written off as a lucky guess or the result of millennia of simple naked eye observation, even though this could not explain their knowledge of the outer planets. The denial was a fortress built of intellectual arrogance and cultural bias designed to protect the established order from a truth it refused to see. This wall of denial persists to this day. Mainstream archaeology and anthropology continue to operate under a powerful, unwritten rule: thou shalt not consider the ancient astronaut theory. Any scholar who dares to step outside these bounds and examine the evidence with an open mind is swiftly branded a pseudoscientist, ridiculed by their peers, and denied funding and tenure. This creates a powerful chilling effect, ensuring that the majority of researchers never even think to ask the forbidden questions. The dogma of denial is self-policing, a system of intellectual control that guarantees the modern suppression of the Anunnaki remains firmly in place, guarding the gates of accepted history against any and all intruders. Let us look closer at the evidence that was so hastily dismissed as myth. The technological descriptions embedded in Sumerian texts and art are just too specific, too numerous, and honestly too consistent to be mere coincidence. The Anunnaki are not depicted as ethereal spirits floating on clouds. They're described as beings who use tangible physical technology. Their tablets speak of Shems, a word that's often translated as name, but whose root meaning refers to a skyborne vehicle that rises high in the air. These Shems are described in detail, said to create immense sound and wind, and are often depicted in carvings as conical, rocket-shaped objects, sometimes with fins and trails of fire. This really isn't the language of myth, it is the language of observation. The Sumerians even described the home planet of the Anunnaki Nibiru with a level of astronomical precision that should have been impossible. They gave its exact orbital period as 3,600 Earth years, an orbit they claimed was highly elliptical, and brought it through the inner solar system between Mars and Jupiter. How could an ancient civilization, supposedly equipped with only the most basic observational tools, invent such a specific and complex celestial mechanic? Modern science is only now, with its search for a theoretical Planet 9, beginning to entertain the possibility of a massive planet in a similar strange orbit at the edge of our solar system. The Sumerians weren't guessing. They were recording information given to them. The evidence extends beyond just rockets and planets. Consider the Sumerian king list, an artifact that documents the reigns of kings for hundreds of thousands of years. Mainstream history dismisses the impossibly long lifespans of the earliest kings as mythological exaggeration. But the Anunnaki theory provides a startlingly logical explanation. The list is broken into two parts, before and after the Great Flood. The kings who ruled before the flood were full-blooded Anunnaki, or their direct descendants, who possessed incredibly long lifespans. After the flood, as the Anunnaki bloodline became more diluted through interbreeding with humans, the lifespans of the kings listed become progressively shorter and more human-like. These are not isolated clues, but a mosaic of interconnected evidence pointing to a lost technological past. From depictions of what appear to be wrist-mounted communication devices to descriptions of powerful energy weapons used in the wars between the gods, the echoes are everywhere. To call it all coincidence and symbolism is really to stretch credulity to its breaking point. A far simpler, though more shocking explanation exists. The Sumerians were telling the truth. They were the inheritors of a technological legacy from their creators, and they dutifully recorded the details of that technology in the only ways they knew how, leaving behind a trail of breadcrumbs for future generations to follow back to the stars. The most forbidden truth, the secret that has been guarded more fiercely than any other, is this: the Anunnaki never truly left. Their physical presence may have receded with the passage of their homeworld Nibiru, but their influence, their control, and most importantly, their genetic legacy remained. The Sumerian texts are chillingly clear on this point. They describe how the Anunnaki gods took human women as their partners. They bred with the daughters of men. This was not a romantic union. It was a strategic decision, a way to create a new class of intermediaries, a ruling elite that would govern humanity on their behalf. These offspring were the first demigods, beings who were part human, part Anunnaki. They walked the line between two worlds, possessing the long life and superior intellect of their celestial fathers, but bound to the earth like their human mothers. This was the birth of royalty. The concept of a blue blood or a divine right to rule did not spring from human imagination. It was a biological reality engineered by our creators. The Sumerian king list, the same artifact that documents reigns lasting for millennia, makes a stunning declaration. After the Great Flood, after the world was wiped clean, it states that kingship once again descended from heaven. This was not a metaphor for divine approval. It was a literal statement of fact. The Anunnaki re-established their control by placing their own hybrid children on the thrones of the new cities, starting with the city of Kish. These new rulers were the progenitors of a bloodline that was intentionally kept separate and pure from the general population for generations. This sacred bloodline became the most valuable commodity on the planet. The texts describe intricate genealogies, carefully tracking the descendants of the gods. Royal families went to extreme lengths to preserve the purity of their Anunnaki heritage, which is why incestuous marriages among royalty were so common in the ancient world, from the pharaohs of Egypt to later dynasties across the globe. They were not merely consolidating power, they were trying to preserve the concentration of their divine DNA. They believed this genetic inheritance gave them the wisdom, the authority, and the inherent right to rule over the common masses who did not share their celestial ancestry. This belief system became the foundation of monarchy for thousands of years. The implications are honestly profound and deeply unsettling. It suggests that the class structure of human society, the division between rulers and the ruled, is not a social construct, but a genetic one. It posits that for millennia, humanity has been governed by a hidden lineage of hybrid beings who see themselves as fundamentally different and superior to the rest of us. They are the shepherds and we are the flock. This is the ultimate conspiracy, one that has been playing out in plain sight for all of human history. The Anunnaki didn't just create humanity as a slave race. They created a permanent management class to keep us in line, a dynasty of demigods, whose descendants may still be in power today. How far does this bloodline extend? If you trace the official genealogies of Europe's royal families, you will find they all interconnect, creating a single vast family tree. Publicly, they trace their lineage back to historical figures like Charlemagne or William the Conqueror. But what about the hidden histories, the esoteric traditions they keep private? Many of these families have long claimed, often in secret, a much older and more fantastic descent. They claim to be descended from the heroes of Troy, who in turn were said to be descended from the gods of Olympus. And where did the Greek gods come from? Their stories bear a striking resemblance to the Sumerian Anunnaki, with their celestial wars, their family squabbles, and their interference in human affairs. It's the same story, retold with different names. The connection becomes undeniable when you examine the Sumerian king list once more. It explicitly states that after the Great Flood, kingship descended from heaven. This wasn't just a Sumerian phenomenon. The very same pattern emerges in ancient Egypt. The first pharaohs were said to be gods who ruled for thousands of years. Following them came the Shemsu-Hor, or the followers of Horus, demigods who acted as a bridge to the first mortal human pharaoh, Menes. This perfectly mirrors the Sumerian model: gods, then demigods, then human kings with a diluted but still potent divine bloodline. Is it a coincidence that both of humanity's earliest, most advanced civilizations shared this identical foundation myth for their monarchies? Or were they both established by the same Anunnaki masters? This concept of a divine right to rule, passed down through a sacred bloodline, became the central pillar of power throughout history. The Roman emperors declared themselves gods. The monarchs of Europe insisted they were appointed by God, and to question their authority was to commit blasphemy. They adopted symbols of power that echo ancient Sumerian motifs: the eagle, the lion, the serpent. These were not random choices. They were emblems of the Anunnaki houses, broadcast to those who understood the secret history. The entire structure of monarchy, of a hereditary ruling class, is a direct legacy of the Anunnaki breeding program. It is the longest-running political and social control system in human history. Think about the implications. If this bloodline conspiracy is true, it means that the major historical events, the wars, the rise and fall of empires, may not have been the chaotic march of history we are taught. Instead, they could have been carefully managed events, orchestrated by a hidden hand elite to consolidate their power and guide humanity along a specific path, one that serves their ancient agenda. The kings and queens of old, and perhaps the powerful elite families of today, are not just people of wealth and influence. They are the inheritors of a divine and dangerous legacy. The guardians of a secret that proves their right to rule is not just a claim, but a birthright written in their very DNA. The Anunnaki influence did not end with the establishment of royal bloodlines. A distinct pattern, a golden thread, can be traced through every major empire that followed Sumer. Look at what they all had in common. From Egypt to Rome, from the Aztecs to the Incas, every great civilization had two defining characteristics. First, they worshipped a pantheon of sky gods who came from the heavens and promised to one day return. These gods were often depicted with non-human features and were associated with specific celestial bodies. Second, these empires were inexplicably obsessed with gold. They plundered it, hoarded it, and offered it up to their gods in massive quantities. This is the Anunnaki signature, stamped onto a dozen different cultures. Consider the Egyptians. Their gods, like Ra and Osiris, were celestial beings who were said to have once ruled on earth directly. The pharaohs, who claimed to be their descendants, dedicated a vast portion of their empire's resources to mining gold. They didn't just use it for decoration. They considered it the flesh of the gods. They believed that to be buried in gold was to ensure their passage into the afterlife to join their celestial ancestors. This is not economics, this is a religious imperative, a cultural echo of the Anunnaki's original purpose for being on Earth. The demand for gold was programmed into the religions they established to control their human subjects. The pattern repeats across the Atlantic, in the Americas. The Aztec and Inca empires were separated from the Old World by thousands of miles of ocean and thousands of years, yet their behavior was identical. The Incas called gold the sweat of the sun, and the Aztecs sacrificed countless lives to their sky god Huitzilopochtli, offering him treasures of gold. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived, the natives initially believed them to be their returning gods, as their prophecies had foretold. And what was the one thing the conquistadors craved above all else? Gold. It was as if two different branches of the same control system, one ancient and one modern, were meeting for the first time, both driven by the same programmed obsession. This is not random cultural convergence. It is evidence of a single global control system established in antiquity. The Anunnaki set up operations across the planet, not just in Sumer. They created different cultures, different religions, but embedded the same core commands within each one. Worship the sky gods who gave you life and collect the gold they demand. The empires of history were, in essence, franchises of the same Anunnaki corporation. Their purpose was to organize humanity into efficient labor units to continue the mining operation on a global scale. The wars between them were little more than hostile takeovers, with one branch of the bloodline vying for control of territory and resources against another. One of the most persistent and misunderstood symbols associated with this bloodline is the serpent. In the mainstream narrative, particularly in Western religion, the serpent is a symbol of evil, a tempter, the deceiver in the Garden of Eden. But what if this is a deliberate inversion of the truth? What if the serpent was the original symbol of the Anunnaki creators, specifically the faction led by the scientist god Enki? In Sumerian lore, Enki was the chief scientist, the master geneticist. His personal emblem, seen in countless cylinder seals, was two intertwining serpents. This symbol, which looks identical to the DNA caduceus, represented his mastery over the building blocks of life. He was the serpent god who created humanity. Now reconsider the story of Eden. The Bible speaks of a God Yahweh who wants to keep Adam and Eve ignorant and forbids them from eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Then a serpent comes along and encourages them to eat, to have their eyes opened, and to become as gods. In the context of the Anunnaki story, this makes perfect sense. Yahweh is a reflection of the tyrannical Anunnaki leader Enlil, who wanted to keep his slave race docile and stupid. The serpent is the rebellious scientist Enki, who had a soft spot for his creation and wanted to give them the knowledge and wisdom to become independent. The sin in the Garden of Eden was not disobedience. It was humanity receiving a genetic or intellectual upgrade from its true creator, Enki. This benevolent view of the serpent was preserved in many secret societies and Gnostic traditions that were later branded as heresies by the mainstream church. Groups like the Ophites literally worshipped the serpent, believing it was the true hero of the Eden story, the being who brought enlightenment or gnosis to mankind. The serpent symbol, representing DNA, wisdom, and healing, became the mark of these hidden knowledge streams. It is the serpent on the rod of Asclepius, the symbol of medicine to this day. It is the Ouroboros of the alchemists, the serpent eating its own tail, symbolizing eternity and the cyclical nature of knowledge. The mark of the serpent is the mark of Enki's rebellion and his gift to humanity. Therefore, the demonization of the serpent was a crucial part of the cover-up. The faction of the Anunnaki, represented by the tyrannical Enlil, whose ideals were carried forward into many mainstream religions, needed to discredit their rival, Enki. They did this by twisting his symbol of life and knowledge into a symbol of evil and deception. They taught humanity to fear the very being who tried to set them free. The bloodline conspiracy is therefore a two-sided story. It is the story of the ruling bloodline of Enlil, who demand obedience and worship. And it is the story of the hidden bloodline of Enki, a lineage that carries the secret knowledge, the gnosis, waiting for the day when humanity is ready to awaken and claim its full inheritance. The final act of this cosmic drama is not being played out on dusty clay tablets or in the tombs of pharaohs. It is happening right now, inside you, written into the very code of your being. In the 21st century, the Human Genome Project successfully mapped our DNA, promising to unlock the secrets of life. But it uncovered a mystery that has baffled mainstream science ever since. Scientists discovered that a significant portion of our DNA, initially estimated at over 90%, seemed to have no discernible function. They arrogantly labeled it junk DNA, dismissing it as the leftover evolutionary debris of millions of years. But this explanation has always felt hollow, an admission of ignorance rather than a scientific conclusion. What if this so-called junk is not junk at all? What if this vast, unexplored region of our genetic code is the ultimate proof of the Anunnaki intervention? Think of it as a dormant operating system filled with latent abilities and the ancestral memories of our true origins. It could be the Anunnaki signature, the indelible mark of the manufacturer left upon their product. In 2010, geneticists analyzing the human genome were forced to admit that at least 3% of our DNA has no known evolutionary origin on this planet. It appears to have been inserted into our genetic line from an external non-terrestrial source. The scientific papers that published these findings were cautious, but the implication was earth-shattering. There is a ghost in our genes, an alien signal hiding in plain sight within every cell of our bodies. This discovery provides a stunning biological context for the Sumerian creation texts. The stories of Enki mixing the essence of the gods with the genetic material of early hominids are no longer just myths. They are a plausible explanation for this unexplained genetic anomaly. Perhaps the junk DNA contains the superior attributes of the Anunnaki themselves, their longevity, their heightened consciousness, their psychic abilities. These traits may have been deliberately deactivated by the controlling Enlil faction, who wanted a subservient worker, not a potential rival. But the code is still there, waiting for the right key, the right frequency, to be switched back on. A prospect that must terrify any elite who rely on our ignorance. The fear is that this genetic inheritance is a ticking time bomb. As our own science of genetics advances, we get closer and closer to understanding how to activate these dormant sequences. What happens to the world when humanity discovers it has the innate potential to become as gods, just as the serpent in the garden promised? What happens to the power structures, the religions, and the systems of economic enslavement when we remember that our true birthright is not servitude but godhood? The scientific discovery of the Anunnaki's genetic signature is the ultimate threat to the established order. It's the final piece of evidence that proves the conspiracy is real, and the key to unlocking our freedom is carried within our own blood. If you think the study of ancient astronaut DNA is confined to the fringes of conspiracy forums, you are gravely mistaken. The truth is far more shocking. Declassified documents leaked by whistleblowers and forced into the public domain through Freedom of Information Act requests prove that the world's most powerful intelligence agencies have been secretly investigating this very subject for over 70 years. They have known about the Anunnaki connection, the genetic manipulation of humanity, and the existence of extraterrestrial beings since at least the 1950s. While they publicly funded archaeologists to dismiss the stories as myth, they were privately spending billions on Black Ops projects to understand and exploit the very same forbidden knowledge. One of the most explosive leaks concerns a program allegedly codenamed Project Serpo. According to insiders, this was a top-secret exchange program between the US government and the surviving inhabitants of a crashed extraterrestrial vehicle believed by many researchers to be of Anunnaki origin. The core purpose of this program was to understand alien biology and genetics. The documents claim that U.S. military scientists were given access to alien technology that allowed them to analyze and compare human DNA with that of our supposed creators. What they found confirmed the Sumerian text in every horrifying detail. Humanity was indeed a hybrid species, a genetically engineered asset. This knowledge was immediately classified at a level far above top secret. Why would they hide this? The answer is simple: control. The discovery that our DNA was manipulated by an alien race is the most valuable and dangerous secret in human history. In the wrong hands, it could be used to develop terrifying new forms of biological warfare or to create a genetically enhanced super soldier. But in the hands of the public, it could spark a global awakening that would shatter the elite's grip on power forever. Therefore, a decision was made to create a two-tiered system of knowledge. The public would be fed a steady diet of dismissive science and Hollywood fantasies about aliens, while behind the scenes, a shadow government would hoard the real technology and information for themselves, using it to further their own agenda. These declassified CIA and DIA files are the smoking gun. They admit to studying everything from ancient astronaut theory to extraterrestrial gene therapy. They reveal a deep, long-standing, and official interest in the very topics that mainstream science and media tell us are ludicrous. So you must ask yourself a simple question: why would the most pragmatic and ruthless intelligence agencies on the planet waste decades of research and untold sums of money on a myth? They wouldn't. They have been studying the Anunnaki legacy because they know it is real. The Vault of Secrets is not just about UFOs. It's about who we are, where we came from, and the terrifying truth about our masters. This brings us to the final terrifying question: who stands to lose if humanity awakens and remembers its true creators? The answer is simple: the entire global elite. The pyramid of power that has dominated this planet for millennia is built on a foundation of lies. It relies on the belief that we are alone in the universe, that our evolution was an accident, and that we are limited beings in need of masters. The Anunnaki truth demolishes this entire structure. It reveals that the royal bloodlines, the secret societies, and the powerful banking dynasties who claim a divine or superior right to rule may indeed be correct, but their divinity is that of a prison warden, not a benevolent creator. Their greatest fear is the loss of control. Their power is derived from keeping humanity divided, fearful, and ignorant. They pit us against each other based on race, religion, and nationality, all artificial constructs designed to keep us from realizing our shared heritage and our collective power. The revelation that all of humanity is one family, the genetically modified children of extraterrestrial visitors, would instantly render all these divisions meaningless. It would unite humanity against its common oppressors. The carefully constructed matrix of control, built over thousands of years, would dissolve in an instant. This is why they fight so hard to suppress this knowledge, labeling it as dangerous pseudoscience and ridiculing anyone who dares to speak it. The return of Nibiru, the homeworld of the Anunnaki as described by the Sumerians, represents the ultimate endgame in this conspiracy. Whether its return is a literal, physical event or a metaphor for the return of suppressed knowledge, the outcome is the same. It signifies a paradigm shift, a moment of reckoning when the truth can no longer be contained. The elite know this cycle is coming to a close. Their frantic efforts to build underground bunkers, to militarize the police, and to control information on the internet are not random acts. They are the desperate preparations of a ruling class that knows its time is running out. They fear the day when their gods return, and they are forced to answer for what they have done to humanity. Ultimately, this knowledge is frightening to the elite because it empowers you. It transforms you from a powerless cog in a meaningless machine into the heir of a cosmic legacy. It tells you that the limitations you feel are not real. They are programmed illusions. The power to unlock your full potential, to activate your dormant DNA, and to reclaim your sovereignty lies within you. The Anunnaki story is not just about the past, it is about the future. It is a roadmap to our liberation. Sharing this forbidden knowledge is not just an act of rebellion, it is an act of evolution. The question is no longer whether the story is true, but whether you are brave enough to accept its consequences and play your part in the final act. We stand now at a crossroads. Behind us lies the comfortable, sanitized version of history we have been taught since birth. It is a simple story, one of slow, accidental evolution and the steady march of progress. It is a narrative that places humanity at the pinnacle of creation on this lonely planet. But ahead of us lies another path, a darker and more treacherous trail, yet one that resonates with a strange sense of truth. This is the path illuminated by the forbidden history of the Anunnaki. It is a history etched in ancient clay, encoded in our very DNA, and whispered in the corridors of power. It tells us we are not alone. It tells us we were not an accident. And it tells us our destiny is far grander and more terrifying than we have ever been allowed to imagine. To accept the Anunnaki narrative is to challenge everything you thought you knew. It requires a complete demolition of the intellectual structures that have been built around us. The foundations of modern science, religion, and government are all shaken to their core by this single explosive idea. It recontextualizes our entire existence. Our gods become extraterrestrial geneticists. Our kings and queens become the descendants of a hybrid bloodline. Our inexplicable obsession with gold becomes a slave species directive. And our own bodies become the living evidence of a cosmic crime. This is not a comfortable truth. It is a shattering one. And it is easy to see why so many have chosen to turn away from it, to retreat back to the safety of the official story. The evidence, as we have laid it out, forms a compelling and cohesive narrative. From the consistent accounts in Sumerian texts to the impossible astronomical knowledge they possessed. From the artistic depictions of advanced technology to the modern genetic discoveries of anomalies in our DNA. From the golden thread of empire to the declassified government files admitting to the study of ancient astronaut genetics. Each piece of the puzzle, when viewed in isolation, can be dismissed. But when assembled together, they create a picture so clear and so consistent that it becomes harder to disbelieve than to believe. The sheer weight of the interconnected evidence points to a single profound conclusion. We have been lied to on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend. Ultimately, the choice to believe is a personal one. It is a leap of faith, not into the arms of a comforting religion, but into the cold, hard reality of a cosmic conspiracy. It means accepting that the forces that have shaped our world are not benevolent, and that our history is a carefully constructed lie. This is the burden of forbidden knowledge. It is the price of opening your eyes. Once you see the patterns, you cannot unsee them. Once you understand the agenda, you see it playing out on the world stage every single day. You are no longer just a citizen of a country. You are a child of the stars, an inheritor of a stolen legacy, standing at the crossroads of belief and denial. What do we do with this knowledge? Where do we go from here? This is the final and most important question. The story of the Anunnaki is not just a historical curiosity. It is a call to action. It is a challenge thrown down across millennia, from our ancient ancestors to us, the generation that finally has the tools to verify their claims. The first step is to question everything. We must re-examine the history we have been fed, scrutinize the authority of the institutions that feed it to us, and look at the world with new eyes. We must see the connections between ancient myths and modern science, between royal bloodlines and corporate power, between the demand for gold and the systems of economic enslavement that still bind us today. This knowledge was suppressed for a reason. It was hidden because it is powerful. It is the key that unlocks the prison of the mind. An ignorant and divided humanity is easy to control. An awakened and united humanity is the greatest threat to the elite who have ruled from the shadows for so long. This is why sharing this information is so critical. The internet has given us a weapon that our ancestors never had. The ability to bypass the official gatekeepers of information and speak directly to one another. Every conversation, every shared video, every comment that asks the forbidden questions helps to weaken the foundations of the lie. It is a grassroots awakening, a viral spread of truth that the censors cannot possibly contain. The path forward is one of inner and outer revolution. The inner revolution is the process of deprogramming ourselves from the slave mentality. It is about remembering the divine potential encoded within our junk DNA. It is about reclaiming our sovereignty as conscious beings and refusing to be governed by fear. The outer revolution is the act of spreading this awareness, of building communities based on this higher truth, and of peacefully but firmly withdrawing our consent from the systems of control. The elite's power is an illusion sustained only by our belief in it. When we stop believing in their authority, their pyramid of power will crumble into dust. So we leave you with a choice. You can dismiss this as fiction, a wild conspiracy theory for the gullible. You can click away, return to the comfort of the matrix, and forget the unsettling truths you have heard today. Or you can choose to be a part of the awakening. You can choose to be a beacon of light, a sharer of forbidden knowledge, and a warrior in the fight for humanity's soul. The secrets of the Anunnaki have been buried for 5,000 years. Now they are unearthed. The choice of what happens next is not up to them. It is up to you. Will you share this forbidden knowledge? Will you help humanity remember?